All right, I think let's get started. Welcome. So. I think this is a broad topic. We'll be on time. I think we have around 40 minutes or so to go through a lot of content. But I think what I wanted to cover today is primarily a few things. Um, I think hopefully I think the content should satisfy people in different roles. Just by a show of hands, how many of you, I think this is a little bit of a trick question right now, I think, the age of AI, but how many of you still code? Your managers are not here, but I think they want to ask the question again. How many of you still code? Same set of hands? Okay. All right, good. I think, as I said, it's a trick question. I think nowadays, AI and coding assistants, I'm sure everyone, and even if I think probably our parents, if you teach them how to use Cloud Code or some other tools, I'm sure they will also start developing code, right? Fantastic. So let's get started. I think we are now in March 2026. Obviously, I think we have. I think I would say the AI journey started. When ChatGPT was launched, right? I think that's when it came into the mainstream. I think it was in the realm of a lot of data science, and I think pretty much it was a high bar for a lot of us, myself included, right? So I come from an application background, and pretty much whenever people used to talk about AI and ML, you had a little bit of a high bar if you had to get into it, right? But I think we are now here, and obviously this has come through a lot of phases, right? I think if you had asked me last year, a lot of our customers started actually deploying stuff in production, right, from POCs and things like that, right? So this is a journey. I think it's no longer something that is in the realm of where you had to use it for niche cases, right? I think with AWS ourselves, I think we had a lot of AI services. Pretty much we were the pioneers, but they were not what you would call as a classic generative AI kind of services, right? I think a lot of you probably, I think when you go to the airport, I'm pretty sure you all use Digiyatra, right? I think, and of course, when we all, COVID struck, we all, scrambled to get ourselves vaccinated. Again, there was a COVID portal, and of course, we all use FastTag pretty extensively whenever we have to go out. So the common theme for all these use cases, what I'm talking to you about, they're all driven, I think, behind the scenes, at least with some aspects of AWS behind it, right? For example, Digiyatra uses so it's called recognition. That's how it's able to detect. When you are going there and looking at the camera, and it tries to do like an image comparison between what is there in your Aadhaar card and the picture that it takes. It need not be generative AI, but AI has been there for many years in real world, real applications at scale, right? Similarly, Coven, I think, also is an example. Might not be a AI use case, but pretty much an application at scale, right? Again, I think a lot of our customers, I think probably a lot of you yourselves included, I think there has been going to be a leapfrog of usage of these kind of generative applications across all different verticals and segments, right? I think this is what a lot of our analysts are saying. I think pretty much, I think it's become, we are probably at a phase where people want to use GenAI first and then see if it works. If not, maybe they roll back and use something else, right? That's where we are. Now, let me walk you through a little bit of the actual journey itself. I think pretty much when we came from the left side to the right side, where we are now currently is what we call as agentic AI systems. Pretty much, I was reading an article, I think this morning in New York Times. Even in some of the power user developer kind of they have been claiming. I'm not sure if this is really true, but the article in New York Times today, it says even in companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and other companies, they are saying, I haven't coded for almost 8 to 9 months, right? I think they're pretty much letting the AI coding tools themselves be autonomous. They are basically nudging it if it's not able to develop code and things like that. So primarily where we are today is we are getting into the realm of fully autonomous kind of systems. I'll also share some examples on AWS services where you can use it to achieve that. So basically here, when you are in this leftmost side, uh, the role of human is becoming a little less important, especially for actual coding, right? I mean, you might be carrying with you a lot of domain experience, and maybe you are maybe there are other things that you might participate in, but the actual coding and maybe testing and design and other things are all being done by others. And similarly, it's not restricted to software development alone. It's getting into where analysts, business people, managers, they're all using it day in and day out, right? Pretty much letting the AI do its thing, and if it doesn't work out, but of course there are some challenges there, right? Now, as AWS, I will go a little deeper later, but pretty much we have, as with all services, we have taken a thing that we will be the platform of choice, irrespective of whatever vendor you want to experiment with, right? But our key strengths are, of course, the platform. We also have our own models, but what we want to give you is a safe zone for you to play around with things, right? I think that's what AWS has been doing over the period of last 2 years or so. Um, we will get into some of these topics, but pretty much, when we are today, especially when you are deploying to production, you cannot just let an agent run, right? So there are a lot of other things that you need to take care of, and that's pretty much what we are trying to do to help you take your applications and AI-based agentic applications to production, right? This is a little bit of the common use cases that we are seeing in the industry today. Of course, there are customers, users who use maybe different things, but pretty much I think this kind of covers a lot of the use cases, common use cases that at least I see when I'm talking to customers in India and in APJ. I mean, chatbots are still pretty much used by a lot of the people. I think they still have a role to play, but the key difference, at least today in March, is we are slowly moving from kind of like text-based chatbots to multimodal kind of a things, right? I think I'm sure a lot of you get this kind of robocalls. Where you get these automated calls which try to sell you things, right? I think that is where the change is happening from a text-based kind of chatbot. It is slowly moving into what we call as multimodal LLMs, right? And I mean, of course, we have AWS partners who are also taking a key role here. We have partners like Levin Labs, Cartesia, and others, DeepGram, who have products in this particular space, right? I think one interesting aspect that I wanted to share is when I was speaking to them, and also when we are talking to customers, I mean, of course, every country has its own nuances. So in India, what our partners have shared and what we also seen is fintech happens to be a key area where these kind of voice-based LLMs have taken a big leap, right? I think I'm not sure what is the reason, but while in the US it's primarily like healthcare and e-commerce and things like that, but in India, fintech. And within fintech, somebody wants to guess which specific area where these voice-based LLMs are being used quite extensively? Customer care? No, it's a good. Anything else? Exactly. Not just loan. Basically, within loans, it's debt collection. Okay. It will say, money, you have taken a 5,000 rupee loan. It was due on like 5th, whatever March. Are you going to pay or not? Right? So then you say yes. No, I'll say no. Yeah, I have a challenge. So debt collection, I mean, surprisingly has become one of the more common use cases. But yes, I think loan dispersal, those kinds of things have taken a leap, and especially in India, it's quite challenging, as you all know, right? We have different languages, and pretty much we have a low tolerance. The moment we know that it's a robocall kind of a thing, we try to cut it off. So there's a lot of emphasis on dialects and things like that. And in fact, the voice LLMs have gone even to the extent of going in for regional dialects also. Like for example, one of our partners, if you look at Cartesia, they have a Telugu voice, which is like a Telangana, and for Andhra also, right? And similarly in Karnataka, maybe you could have somebody who's from Bangalore and versus from somebody from Bangalore, right? So we are going in. I mean, so this is an area that is still having a lot of innovation. That's what I'm trying to say. And of course, coding and other things are also pretty much important, and data processing is also important, right? So this is a little bit of a snapshot. This again is a ever-growing kind of a thing in terms of what large language models does Bedrock support, right? I think this is, as you can see, we have pretty much a lot of players here, including a lot of what we call as open weight models, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time, but pretty much the key difference between, say, running your own model on any kind of a VM or taking the API from other vendors to something running on Amazon Bedrock is the key difference. Especially, I think a lot of you probably are working in larger enterprises where security is key. Your security team will probably not allow you to use them if they're not satisfied with how data privacy and protection are being done. So all these things Bedrock supports quite extensively, and of course compliance and other aspects, right? And Amazon's family itself, we have come in what I call the second generation of models, Amazon Nova 2, and we have our own models, which are again one of the key things that we'll also notice is, which I'm sure you should practice, is while some of the more expensive models might always seem to be the seem to be your preference when you start using it, but then as you start using it, right, I think then you will quickly realize that it will become more expensive when you start using them, right? For example, one of our customers, DTDC, if you go there and use their customer chatbot, that is actually running behind the scenes with models on Bedrock. But then what they've also done is they've also used an open weights model, because how are models charged? Tokens, right? So it's charged based on both input tokens and output tokens, and pretty much when you have like a B2C use case, when you have thousands and millions of users accessing it, then the choice becomes, should I use the more expensive model or should I use something light, right? So that's the key thing. And of course, we also have models like Nova 2 Sonic, which is speech to speech, similar to the other use cases that I was talking to you about. But as I said, I want to put something on Nova Lite, right? So this happens to be the most, least expensive of all the models. But at the same time, as you can see, right, I think with some of the, ratings and things like that, it pretty much performs on par. It's jumped from the right hand side to the left hand side. It's almost there in the top 10. So one of the key decision maker things that you as developers that you need to make is, can a larger model which is more expensive, or can I go in for a slightly, maybe in terms of accuracy, it's slightly lesser than the larger model, but will it meet my requirements, right? So that is, model evaluation tends to become now a very key thing for a lot of our use cases. So that is an area that you probably have to rely on. Bedrock itself has some kind of a capability to do where you can compare 2-3 models. It's called model evaluation. But at the same time, you can also look at more like independent kind of analysis, like artificial intelligence analysis and other places, right? So these are some parameters that you'll also always have to look at: price per token, price per million tokens, and output speed and things like that, because these are important aspects, right? I think there is an important parameter called time to first token, when it starts responding. Otherwise, when you say hello, this is money, and then you have like a long pause of 4 to 5 seconds, pretty much you might have lost like 40 to 50% of the customer right there, right? So the time to first token, price per million tokens, these are important aspects. that you as developers have to reorient yourself in, right? I think in the good old days we were talking about concurrency, response time, and those aspects, but these are new metrics that are very, very important in terms of evaluating models, right? Now, Anthropic is also a very close partner of ours. Pretty much, whenever they release newer models, it's launched on Bedrock first, and then of course, if you have not used, I'm sure most of you use it. But this is pretty much what they have, like the family of models. Of course, the Opus is the most preferred one, but then you also have an IQ, right? So again, similar to Nova Lite, you also have to kind of decide between whether you want to use an haiku or a opus, right? So of course there are some important aspects, for example, especially for maybe use cases where you probably have to do extensive research, you need to do a lot of reasoning and things like that. Then I think maybe you might want to use opus versus a sonnet or a haiku, right? Another important parameter, I think, which I kind of missed earlier, is along with those other aspects, the context window, or how much you can data you can stuff to the model. That's also very important. Now a lot of models, of course, also are increasing that. Now you can easily can take in something like 1 million tokens in the context window, right? So what this means is you can probably at 1 million context window, you can stuff an entire code base probably into LLM and ask it to analyze and things like that, right? So okay, so let me quickly, I think, touch upon an interesting aspects. I added this because a lot of I'm seeing this an increasing trend with a lot of customers. They are they want to kind of, I mean, it's similar to what containers was, right? I think pretty much when we are using containers, I think a lot of us, you started experimenting with some kind of proprietary model, container orchestration platforms, and then pretty much some customers said, no, I want to be open source. That's when you kind of standardize on Kubernetes and things like that. And similarly here, I think open weight models, especially those open weight models from China, are being used quite extensively. And similarly, with open weight models in AWS, you can use them in different ways. While Bedrock is, of course, what I've been talking to you about. If you want to do something like a self-managed kind of a model, you can also run them on SageMaker. The key difference between running them on SageMaker and Bedrock is a fully managed serverless kind of a thing, versus SageMaker, you might have to provision servers and things like that, right? And then, of course, one surprising thing also was EKS or Kubernetes-based platforms are increasingly also becoming used by a lot of customers for inferencing, because I think there are a lot of frameworks that are available now where you can use EKS and Kubernetes for doing a lot of inferencing. In fact, I'm told, I'm not seen the architecture, but a lot of larger, some of the most popular ones, including I think OpenAI, they all run, when you call ChatGPT, they are running behind the scenes on millions of Kubernetes clusters, right? I think if not maybe in millions of clusters, maybe millions of nodes running those clusters, right? So that's what EKS is. It's a good platform for running instances. These are some open weight models that we are supporting. Of course, the OpenAI kind of models, and then Mistral and a bunch of others, right? And in December, when we had our reInvent, we added some more models. As you can see, again, these are again very popular now, Minimax, Moonshot, again newer models from Qwen, especially things like Qwen Coder and things like that have come into the Bedrock family. So here the model evaluation and the costing, the pricing becomes very, very important now, because one of the advantages with open weight models is they have now, I would say, now with all the latest benchmarks and things like that, they're almost come up to par with even commercial models in terms of performance. But at the same time, the price is drastically less, right? The only thing probably you'll have to think about is what is your appetite for open source versus open weight versus commercial models, right? So that's something in terms of model evaluation that you will have to do for your specific use cases, because we have some guidance. For example, for coding, we can probably suggest a few models, both open weights and commercial models. But then if you have like your own proprietary kind of use case, you will definitely have to run kind of evaluations or both within Bedrock and for some specific use cases before you can select one versus the other, right? Customization is one more area. So obviously, there are ways you can customize models. The key reason happens to be, I think, one is of course increased accuracy is an important aspect, right? When you take a base model and you start using it, you will get some kind of a performance, but that might not always be the best, right? So that's when you need to probably do something like a customization, right? So there are, again, within customization, there are various ways you can do it. I'm not going to go too much into it, but pretty much there are now ways you can do either a full-fledged fine-tuning, or there are also ways you can not go for it fully. There are things like model distillation, where you can have something like a teacher-student kind of a model, where you can use a larger model to train a smaller model, right? So this is again a very popular kind of an architectural pattern that is emerging, especially when you want to do customization. Now, once you have customized it, and for example, if those models are not available in Bedrock, you can actually import those customized models using something called custom model import within Bedrock, right? Now there are once you have, let's assume that you have customized the model, how do you deploy it? There are a couple of ways. One is, of course, as I mentioned, SageMaker is one area where you can do it. But then when you are using SageMaker, as I said, there are things that you will have to take care of it, which tends to be a little bit more, I would say, work for developers and your DevOps team. Primarily on the right-hand side, you'll have to do the main thing is, of course, you're managing the servers yourself. We have tried helping you with a bunch of AMIs that we have created, but then you are still responsible for yourself, right? This is the SageMaker way of deploying a customized model. But if you use like a Bedrock custom model import, you don't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting that you had to see before, right? Here, the only work that you need to do is the model training and tuning, and then you go and deploy it. You don't have to worry about the base infrastructure. So this is an area where I think there are so many models out there. Of course, as I said, while we support a lot of open weight models, I'm sure there are a lot of models which might not be in the supported models. This is one area where you can do it. Now, good, I think you have deployed your model and now you want to do it for a RAG use case. Is that good enough, right? No, right? I think there are a couple of high profile incidents that have happened, right? I think for example, in this case, Air Canada went and deployed the chatbot, and this chatbot obviously had some flaws in the sense that it hallucinated and started giving discounts for non-existing kind of scenarios. So in this case, obviously the customer was pissed. He went and sued Air Canada here, and they had to pay the money, right? Because obviously Air Canada tried to I think in their defense, they went and said, no, I have no control over AI. I don't actually understand, because it's a non-deterministic kind of a thing. I mean, I cannot fully do it. I'm not responsible if it kind of hallucinated and gave a fake kind of a discount code. But no, the code said, as long as it is running within your own application and you are exposing it, you are fully responsible for it, right? I think that's the key thing here. So it's very important, before you kind of start letting loose these agents and bots and other things, that you need to have those adequate precautions. What are those? I'll just comment in a minute. This is one. And closer home, I think this is an observation by our Supreme Court. A lot of lawyers are, some of the lazy ones are, generating some of the court, filings and things like that using popular tools. I think now, now obviously now both the courts, the judges, as well as the defense and others have to make doubly sure that the cases that they are citing are they real or non-existent and things like that, right? So these are some important things that are having an important bearing on on what we have to do when we are deploying them in the real world. So there are a few aspects that we can help you as AWS. One is, of course, we have something called a prompt management. So we want to make sure that prompts that I developed or she develops or somebody else develops, you kind of have like a library of prompts that could be reused across the company. That's one area. And of course, most importantly, for those use cases that I talked about, like the Air Canada use case, we have something called a knowledge base where we have done a lot of heavy lifting for you. All you have to do is select the bits and pieces of what technology you want, and then lo and behold, you can set up a kind of a knowledge base where we can help you with the most important thing is, of course, on the things like guardrails. I think this is very important in terms of so that you have the right adequate thing, right? I think we have had so many instances of where the end users have tricked these bots into doing things which it doesn't want to, right? I think that's where guardrails are very, very important. And of course, security is one more key important. We don't want personally identifiable information and other kinds of things, and of course your own data to get leaked into other kind of customers, right? So these are some important aspects when you start getting into production, right? So where did it come? I talked about the various models, the open weight models, and some of the key checks and balances that we need to do when we start deploying a lot of these applications, agentic applications into production, right? Now, coming to the area of agents, right? I think while we talked about models and things like that, so let's assume that you want to do this kind of a simple prompt, right? So in this case, it says this is a very common thing that a lot of people use to test the models, accuracy of the models. It sounds simple, but sometimes you would be very surprised that a lot of models fail here. Even a simple question like, can you multiply the number of hours in strawberry, right, by the hours of the current time, by the current outdoor temperature in Seattle, and then finally there's like a and the last one is a fairly complex one, right? It's asking you to calculate the log of the gamma function, right, or whatever it's calculated. Now, when you have this kind of a prompt, right, the first one is obviously within the capability of the model itself, right? I'm sure a good model, right, should be able to do it, right? And hopefully, it should also be able to calculate the current time. Obviously, you might get the time based on whatever region it's deployed in. But then the next two things, right? Current temperature in Seattle, current temperature in Bangalore, calculating the log of the gamma function is all pretty complicated, right? So it will not be, the model would not have been trained on these two things, right? So if you look at it, right, I mean, typically this is the kind of a cycle that it undergoes, right? You feed this prompt, to a model, it does its inference, and then it needs to call certain tools, right? Otherwise, it doesn't have the data which, as of today, any data which is outside the realm of what the model has been trained, right? So that's what it is. So to help customers to build what we call as agents which can do these kind of things, we have open source a framework called Strands. I would request, I think, whatever, I mean, even if you're not deploying on AWS, to look at Strands. I think Strands has taken a lot of, become increasingly popular. I think the key thing with Strands is it is again a framework that is, I would say, vendor agnostic. It doesn't matter whether you're using OpenAI, Gemini, or something else. You could still use more Strands framework to create these kinds of agents, right? I think that's the key thing here. And it can support any kind of model. We don't restrict it there. And very simply, if you look at the previous prompt, if I had to create like a tool to calculate the gamma function, this would build something like this, right? In the sense that it's a very simple thing, easy to understand. All you have to do is annotate the code, the part of the thing which you want to expose as a tool with add tool, and then you have this thing running, right? And then of course, if you want to look at the actual prompt that gets fed to the LLM, the previous prompt, which was number of hours in strawberry, blah blah other things, temperature, that would then get translated into different tool calls, and that's when finally the agent will respond, right? Now, this is typically what agents do, right? Now, similarly, when you have this kind of a question about get the snow condition, blah blah other things, typically this again translates into in the real world where the agent has to call multiple MCP servers. This could all be obviously not all of them will be in a single MCP server. You might have to call multiple MCP servers, and finally you might need to have some kind of guardrails and memory, right? The key thing here is you want a secure place to run your agentic code, right? I think especially if you're running something like complex algorithm that is proprietary to your company, you want it to be running in a nice secure sandbox. You don't want your code to kind of interfere, or you want dedicated CPU and memory to run your code. That's one thing. And similarly, you want a way to manage all these MCP servers. As you all know, I think in a lot of companies, they have kind of, your security team would have actually stopped you from deploying MCP servers, because they feel that is a way where your data is actually going to the outside world, right? So that again, there is a lot of restriction there. You want to manage multiple MCP servers, and then of course memory is very very important, right? I'm talking to like a chatbot, and today I say I love coffee, and tomorrow I come back and say what do you want to drink, and the chatbot says do you want to drink tea, right? I mean, I clearly should know that I like coffee, right? I mean, it should not be able to ask the same question. So memory is very very important. And then of course security is important, because you just can't be exposing your agents to the outside world without you knowing who is actually accessing the agents. So what I've listed are some key things here, what is required to take your agents to production, right? A secure place to run your code, memory, identity is important, and managing your MCP servers is very very important. And then of course the last one I just skipped, a lot of them also have to do with actually going to a website, scraping the data and come back to you, right? Not all providers give you data in a nice API kind of a format, right? So if I want to say I want to go to the BDA website and check out some of the properties that are there for auction, or God forbid, go to you want to check your traffic fines that you have incurred, your traffic police is not going to give you, I mean, at least I'm not aware of these entities that give you data in a nice API, right? So you have to go to the website. So getting to the website is also an important aspect, right? Browser function is very very important. Now oh god, this has not come out well. I will go to a different one. Yeah, okay, so again this is not rendering properly, but we have a service called Agent Core, which can help you with all these key aspects of having a good runtime, memory, both short term and long term, a gateway kind of a thing, as well as a browser kind of a function where it can go and fetch data from the outside world, right? So this is, I think, Agent Core is an important aspect of running your agents at scale, right? So this is, I think, a service that we launched in December of last year. It was there for some time, but then now it is it's now generally available to everyone to start using it, right? So I think I had a demo, but I think I'll skip this. But what I wanted to show was, typically when you are going to creating an agent, in this case it's like a plant finder kind of a thing. If you look at it, it is actually using all the capabilities. It's not just analyzing the plant, but there are again multiple agents that are running within Agent Core. And finally, when it detects that the plant had some disease, it actually will go to a website like an Amazon.in or some other website and actually place an order, right, for you to buy those kind of fertilizers. So that's the kind of thing where you are not just creating an agent, but you're also creating an action. But in some cases, this browser thing might not be able to completely fulfill your entire thing. Maybe you might want to have like a check balance, so that at the time of actual payment you can actually stop it and say, I want to come back and do it, right? But what I'm trying to say is, in today's world you can do all these things with agents at scale, right? So the agent core can be used, and we have a CLI kind of a thing. It's a pretty much an easy thing to do this with this, right? Now, lastly, and obviously, I think we all are hearing a lot about AI-based coding tools, and with AWS also, we have gone through a little bit of multiple iterations. And the one tool that has really, taken off, and amidst this very crowded field, right? I think you have your Cloud Code, your Codex, your Cursor, Windsurf, you name it, right? We also have one more tool called Kiro. I think I will not go into a lot of depth about Kiro, but I think I'll just kind of highlight a few things. So you can definitely start playing with Kiro. I think especially, I think some of you might be from larger enterprises, or maybe even from startups. So one of the key thing that what we have noticed is, when you talk about AI coding tools and you just feed in a prompt, the key thing here is, sometimes the LLM is able to understand or anticipate your needs, or sometimes you'll have to go back and forth. There's like a lot of decision points that you have to do before it finally arrives at an output, right? Now, what we have done is, we have created a new way of, helping you to reach that destination. That's called spec-based development. So essentially, what we do is we convert your prompt, a natural language prompt, into a specification, right? And then we start generating code for you. So we feel that this is a much better way of actually developing stuff. So we of course also support vibe-based coding. You just give a prompt and ask it to do it. But I think the key thing here is, when you give a natural language prompt, it will convert it into, initially into a kind of like a user stories in terms of the requirements, and from user stories it goes to design, coding, and finally, testing and things like that. So that's the key thing with Kiro's spec-based development. So this is, I think, pretty much, I think rather than doing like a hit and miss kind of a thing, this is an, I feel a more foolproof way of developing stuff, right? The other thing is, of course, we also have like MCP integration. I think it also supports the newer A2A kind of protocol. I think the steering is one more area where you can actually, help it to understand. For example, within a company, you might have some standards. For example, some companies standard on certain frameworks, certain versions of Java, .NET, and things like that. Those kind of things can be put in steering. And then hooks is something that we all do day to day, right? I mean, the moment I write code, do build stuff and test it, I will also have to update the documentation. Those kind of common things can be created as hooks, so that when you just give like a prompt, either with a spec-based thing or anything else, these kind of things should always happen whether you remember or not, right? Checking the code, do a testing, update a documentation, all these kind of common things that you do get into hooks, right? And of course, similar to skills, what is there in Claude, we also have something called powers. So common things, right? For example, that you might have developed like a pattern, you can create it as a power and share it amongst yourself, right? I mean, it's like, for example, there might be like a specific set of prompts and specific set of MCP servers that you might be using it, and that works for you. So common things include, like, for example, I use for example, social posting on social media quite a lot. So I have a way of posting stuff, right? I need so and so things. I also use an MCP server to actually fetch some blog and documentation and things like that, and then I create a blog LinkedIn post. Now this is a thing that I do always, right? I do it every day. So now obviously when I have this kind of a thing, I create a power, and that is like my LinkedIn power, and it looks like something like this, and I can then share it with others so that they can also start using it. So common things can be created as powers, right? So we also have, you can create a powers, but we also have powers with other vendors that can be done, right? Last thing about Kiro, which I wanted to kind of highlight, is what we call as, again, unique to Kiro, is property-based testing. So this is again a unique thing with Kiro, which is like, what happens is when you have when you look at the life cycle of requirements right up to development, it so happens that in between, the LLM tends to forget, or you forget. There is sometimes there's a mismatch between the code that is finally developed with the requirements, right? So what we do is, Kiro has a built-in capability called property-based testing. It goes through your entire life cycle and finds out whether the code that was finally developed did it actually meet your requirements or not, right? So it is a kind of an inbuilt thing. It adds those property-based tests, and finally, when it runs those property-based tests, if it finds that that the code did not meet your requirement, then it will go and say, this particular property failed and things like that. There is a command line version of Kiro also quite extensively. I use mostly the CLI. I think a lot of us have gotten addicted to CLI versus IDE, right? So there's like a big debate going on. Do IDEs still have a place to go? A place in the development? I feel yes, but maybe who knows? Other 6 months, we might all be doing just staring at the screen while the CLI does its own thing, right? Now, this is the next phase of Kiro. This is called Kiro Autonomous Agent that is in preview. So basically, what it does is, it does a few things. One is, of course, it can develop code autonomously while you are doing something else. It can also go against multiple repositories and do the code, right? Obviously, when you are a larger enterprise, there might be different repos which are all kind of interlinked, right? You just don't want to update one particular GitHub repo. You want multiple repos that has to be updated. That autonomous agent can definitely do without, the autonomous agent, the word autonomous agent is, there is very, very less, in fact, zero user interaction. It can do these things on its own, right? So that's where the world is heading, from like sitting at the IDE or CLI to autonomous agents kind of a thing that customers are doing. A couple of agents which I'll quickly also see in this. So these are all called the next wave, which are frontier agents, right? In the sense that a lot of them are able to do things autonomously at the edge, helping you not just with coding with some other aspects. So DevOps agents, you can think of it as like an SRE that you have hired in your team, who will be able to kind of debug things, be able to find an RCA kind of a thing of what exactly happened when things go bad, right? So it can do both reactive as well as proactive kind of a thing. So this again, we launched it last year. Apart from this, we also have a security agent which can do a lot of things that are pretty much typically what security folks do in terms of both things like pen testing, white label testing, and black box testing kind of a thing, right? I'm just kind of skipping a bunch of this in the interest of time, but these are pretty much available out there. Lastly, there are a couple of things that I wanted to kind of highlight. One is, of course, we all have a lot of legacy code that is out there, right? I think we have a lot of older .NET code, older Java code. One of the common things that I keep encountering when I talk to customers is also, there's still a lot of mainframe code out there, right? Now, AWS Transform is something that we launched again recently, which can help you with all these things, including Windows migration from legacy .NET to .NET Core, right? So these are things which, again, an agentic way of transforming legacy code. And the thing that I'm most interested, which is having a lot of resonation with a lot of our customers, is what we call as you can take a picture, is something called custom. So custom has a very nice thing in the sense that a lot of our customers are doing some interesting things. I had a customer who said, I have a lot of Angular code, I want to transform it to React, right? So that's one common use case. Some people, in fact, transform code between different languages. That is a little drastic, but people are doing it, right? I think why not do it? Earlier maybe the limitation was you did not have developers who had expertise in those areas, but now with Transform you can do it. So custom is one area where you can give it a nice prompt and it will start doing it autonomously on you, right? So that's custom for you. So transformation is one more area where AI is playing an increasingly important role, right? Now, this was like a whirlwind kind of a tour. A lot of things what AWS does. Did I forget anything? Is there anything that is out there which is catching a lot of attention and I missed it? Anything? Huh? Claude? There you go. Yes. So, how can I do a talk without OpenClaw, right? I think so. Again, this is, as you all know, if I have not used it. So this is, I mean, while LLMs and AIs are mostly reactive, this is a nice way of, I think, is taking the world by storm. And obviously, we don't have like a specific service like OpenClaw as a service, but if you want to run OpenClaw, you can run them on. We have a service called Lightsail. You have a ready-made kind of a thing that you have deployed with OpenClaw on Lightsail, or if you have the more adventurous one, you can deploy them on EC2 or EKs and things like that. Okay. So yeah, pretty much I think that's all I had. In conclusion, I think we have a vast area within AI which can satisfy both somebody who's like a student, startup kind of a thing, to larger enterprises to run agents at scale, agents in production. And in conclusion, these are some key things that I feel are very, very important, right? The model layer, I think, is pretty much a solved kind of a problem. Of course, you will have newer models and things like that. So I think as developers, probably for you, you might have to, you might not always get it right the first time. You might have to kind of do a little bit of experiments, but that is kind of, it's already there. The real challenge is, of course, taking them to production. So you have services like Agent Core that we can help you with running those agents securely and at scale. And of course, open source is very, very important. And lastly, we are in the journey of autonomous agents running frontier agents. All right. All right. Okay. That's all I had, folks. I think I'm exhausted. I hope this was not too much of a brain dump, but do reach out to me if you need more. Thank you.